Welcome to the Touch MBA Admissions Podcast. Do you need help figuring out which schools to apply to or how to get into the world's top MBA programs? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others on this podcast and on our site, touchmba.com, as they seek the admissions edge. And now, here's your host, Darren Joe.
What's up, guys? It's Darren. Welcome to the Touch MBA podcast. This week, we're continuing with our MBA career series. Many of you wrote into me and told me you really enjoyed our consulting and investment banking episodes. And many of you also wrote me and said you wanted an episode about MBA careers and brand management. So I searched far and wide in my network and was lucky to find Michael Schwartz, who is currently a brand director for Heineken. But he has a decade's worth of experience in brand management. He's worked in this space since graduating from college. Michael got his part-time MBA from NYU Stern. So that's another interesting part of this talk, hearing Michael's insights and experiences with the part-time MBA and his thoughts on who should get part-time MBAs versus full-time MBAs. And you're going to get a lot of on-the-ground insights about what brand managers do, how to break into the industry, and also, maybe get some ideas on where this space is going, so you can best prepare and position yourself to break into this industry after you get your MBA in a couple of years. So I hope you really enjoy this conversation. Just a reminder that you can get free school selection help at touchmba.com. That's right. You just have to upload your resume, tell us your career goals, what you're looking for from an MBA program, and we'd be happy to give you some expert guidance there. So go check that out at touchmba.com. And yeah, let's get straight to my conversation with Michael, who was named in 2016 as one of Forbes 30 under 30 in marketing. So one more credential to throw at you about our guest. Enjoy. Welcome, Michael, to the show.
Thanks a lot, Darren. Great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. So, Michael, could you just tell us a bit more about your background, what you were doing before your MBA, where you went to school, and what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. So like you said, I started in brand. I got very lucky out of undergrad to start working at Philips on the Norelco business for electric shavers and groomers. And I know I was very lucky to get on the client side first because it was just becoming increasingly difficult given I graduated in the height of the recession in May of 2008 from undergrad.
Wow.
So when I first started there, I was able to really learn how to manage a business, manage profit and loss statement, understand everything that goes into launching a product from research all the way to product and packaging development, but also learn the downstream aspect of brand management, which is really involving selling in products to retail, activating different shopper marketing programs, as well as developing consumer communication and working with media and PR agencies to get that out. So after 3.5 years, I decided it was time to move on to a different company in a different industry, and I was able to get the great opportunity of working at one of the largest CPGs in the world with Unilever on the Axe and Dove Men business.
Yeah. So maybe you could tell our international listeners, well, maybe they know about it too. Like, what is Axe?
Axe in the US launched probably like in the late 90s, early 2000s as a male body spray brand. And now they've extended into line extensions from, deodorant to hair gel and shower gel and face wash and things like that. In the UK, for international students, it was known as Lynx prior to coming to.
Yep.
That may be a little bit.
Yeah, because those Axe commercials are hilarious. I mean, they're one of the few commercials I remember seeing.
That was actually a large problem for the brand, trying to move away from the stereotype of, you spray some body spray and then all the girls come flocking.
Yeah.
Immature view of the world. So they've tried to have with their consumer grow up, also their advertising grow up. But that's a story for a different day.
Interesting. Yeah. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. So you were at Unilever.
Yeah, I was at Unilever for about 3 years as well. And at Unilever, they break up their brand management roles in what they call brand building and brand development. So my first rotation was on brand building, which is the downstream aspect of the business. I discussed, where you're activating in market, working with retailers, and then executing communication. And then brand development is what they call the upstream side, where you're working on new insights, product development, different packaging, and communication. So my last year at Unilever, I worked on the Knorr, or the Knorr brand, as it's pronounced in the rest of the world, which is basically packaged food goods, whether it be soups or rice and pasta side dishes. So I was very lucky to get experience across both ends of the spectrum and really round out my brand experience. And then I decided at that point, while I started on, a little bit before I started on Knorr, I wanted to go back and get my MBA. And I knew I wanted to go back part-time because I didn't want to switch out of brand management. And the way that Unilever was structured, the role that I came into as an associate brand manager was where all the MBA grads were coming into at the same time. So there was no reason for me to go back full time and then try to come back and get the exact same role I already had when I was 3 years out of undergrad. So I had applied to NYU part-time program actually a year before. I did not get in, and then I took it off, retook the GRE, and then reapplied a year later because I knew that was the only program I wanted to go to part-time, given the reputation, the quality of the professors, and the flexibility within the program to do it on multiple different campuses.
Got it. Yeah. And I'll definitely want to ask you more about your part-time experience later in the show. I'm sure many of our listeners would be interested in that. But then when did you switch over to the Heineken side?
Yeah, so I switched over to Heineken about 3 years ago now. So it was in it'll be 3 years, so June of 2015. And it was in the middle of my part-time MBA. So I was lucky enough to get a brand manager title when I switched over to Heineken. And then within about, I think, 14 to 16 months, I was promoted to a brand director there, working a lot on a new product and brand launch under the Amstel beer umbrella. But I got very lucky with the types of roles and the people and the way that the company was coming together to launch innovation to come into this role and leverage all of my background. But then about, a year into my time at Heineken, I graduated from my part-time MBA and then just continued growing from there.
Wow. And that's pretty accelerated progression, right? I'm not from the industry, but to go from associate brand manager to brand director, typically how long do those sort of jumps take in the industry, or does it vary by where you are?
Yeah, to be very transparent, it definitely varies by where you are from a company perspective. So at Unilever, you could spend 3 to 5 years as an associate brand manager and then get promoted to brand manager. And then it could take even longer to get to a director level. But at a smaller company like Heineken, or I've also noticed that the titles are very different within alcohol beverage industry, where I almost equate, once I've spent some time at Heineken, that a brand manager role is very similar to an associate brand manager role would be at a CPG company in terms of the scope of work, the type of influence that you have. But at a smaller company like Heineken, it's a lot more entrepreneurial. It's a lot quicker. You're able to have more of an impact. When some of the larger companies, it's very process driven. And I think you have to do might be a little bit of minutia, but it's definitely a way to learn the business from the ground up better.
Right. Got it. And so in your, now like decades worth of experience in this space, what would you say brand managers do? Like if you were to simplify it to people coming to you for advice who want to jump into this industry?
I would say brand management, you are essentially a jack of all trades and master of none. Because you completely own the business. Anything that goes right you will get a congratulations on, but anything that goes wrong, it will come to you to solve, whether or not it's your area of expertise, because you are the sole owner of the brand of the business. It's equivocal to owning a business of your own, and they want you to understand forecasting, how the trends are doing, what the pricing strategy can be, what consumers you're going after, what the right demographic is for your advertising. You have to know a little bit about everything, but then you leverage your cross-functional team and your partners for the areas of expertise. So it's definitely a lot of project management and a lot of people management, but you need to have a very specific mindset to react to what's going on in the marketplace, as well as react to what's going on within the organization and influence other people to push your strategy to or what's best for the brand that you're working on. Because a lot of the challenges become when you're with a large company and it's a portfolio company, there are choices that have to be made around what the organization is going to focus on or how your brand is going to play a role in the overall strategy.
And typically, like, how many people are you working with in your team? Like, let's pick, for example, I mean, I know you mentioned Unilever is a lot bigger than Heineken, but say as a brand manager for Amstel, right? Like, how many people are on your team and who are you working with? Because it sounds like you're working with, like you said, like everyone, executives, customers, distributors.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know how to put a number to it. I mean, from a strict marketing team standpoint, you might have one or two direct people on your team, but in terms of other departments, it would be innovation, supply chain, the research team, the operations team for forecasting, the media team for working with the agency, then all of the different agencies you would work with being a PR agency, an influencer agency. You're creating a new website, also the actual creative agencies to create content. And then likely there's a whole team you're talking to align on what your strategy is to make sure it's consistent with the rest of the markets, and then retailers, and then your sales force in the fields. I mean, it is a massive amount of people that you're trying to manage and keep track of. And it's great to have the cross-functional input, but at times you also have to be the key decision maker and be like, all right, let's stop, let's move forward on this, and then all ride the same boat in the same direction.
Absolutely. And so you mentioned that MBA graduates typically come in at the associate brand manager position or role after school. So what is the typical recruiting process there? What does that look like?
So from over the last 10 years, at least since my experience has been around after undergrad, it's been an interesting transition from what I've noticed in like the larger CPGs like J&J, Procter, and Unilever, where they were primarily recruiting MBA students, where there would be an on-campus presentation, and then there would be on-campus interviews leading into a summer internship program that would be, 12 weeks, 14 weeks, and then there would be a presentation at the end where you were in charge of a specific project, and then maybe a month later you could potentially get an offer, and then your second year of your MBA could be free for all because you have your offer and you're happy. But ultimately, I think the biggest change that I've seen is that companies are now recruiting a lot more undergrads than MBA, and I think it's a shift in just where we see talent coming from across digital capabilities. But from a business perspective, I think they're realizing that if you're training someone at a young age, it could be the same level of experience that an MBA person has if they're switching into the industry. For example, if you worked in car insurance or in finance before your MBA, the amount of information that you'll be able to apply to a brand management role would definitely be greater than an undergrad. But is it worth that $40,000 to $50,000 premium that you have to pay per year to train the person when you can get someone straight out of undergrad for much cheaper who's definitely very ripe to learn and to accelerate their career path? So I know that's a little bit of a digression off of the question, but it's definitely taken a huge toll. At least when I was at Unilever, you could see the amount of visits that they would take to MBA campuses to start recruiting became less and less, and the amount of undergrads became more and more. And they created an entire Unilever Future Leadership program for undergraduates coming in. And I've noticed that across some of the other CPGs as well, where just MBA recruitment has declined.
Yeah, I mean, these are the types of insights we love to have on the show, right? Like, what are the trends? What's going on the ground? Yeah, that's definitely maybe discouraging for a lot of our MBA applicants who are thinking of trying to get into the space. Well, let me ask you, why did you feel when you were kind of seeing these developments, like that you needed an MBA, right?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, at that time at Unilever, there was still the leadership that all had MBAs because they had come in previous classes of growing along that channel. So about 2 years into Unilever, it was when they really started accelerating their undergrad recruitment. And that's really on like the professional side. On the personal side, it was just always something I wanted to do. It was a checkbox of validation that I felt would be really helpful for my career and also just make me feel more confident in my capabilities because I'll be able to learn from professors, but also different people across many different industries where I could bring that knowledge back to an organization. So ultimately, it was a personal achievement I wanted to go after. And of course, it would help me professionally as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And do you feel like it did kind of round out your industry and functional knowledge in that sense, right? Because you've been in this space, right? Most of your career.
Yeah, it's definitely helpful when you can take learnings from a class and bring it, to the job the next day and see what happens. I know we might get into this later for a part-time discussion, but I decided to focus my concentrations on marketing, strategy, and leadership and change management. And the marketing and strategy piece are very parallel to obviously what I've been doing. And if I could do it all again, I would say I would try to go outside my comfort zone and take different classes where I could learn other industries and focus, like just try a real estate class or try a movie and film class just to understand everything that's coming into, culture and the millennial mindset versus trying to become a perfectionist at the marketing trade, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because everything is changing so quickly within marketing that whatever I learned 2 years ago is not going to be relevant in another 2. And the jobs that I just described on this podcast from, 5 or 6 years ago is going to be fundamentally different in the next 5 or 6 years.
Whoa. Okay. So, let's go there. I'm very interested in that. Like how so?
So, even in the last 2 years, just given the acceleration of the Facebooks and the Googles and the Amazons of the world. So the classic marketing funnel that they'll teach you in any class, you have to drive awareness to gain consideration and then drive down the purchase. And hopefully they buy your product for retention and, tell their friends about it. There is so much content out there right now where driving awareness in standard mediums has become increasingly difficult. The typical spot that you would try to create on a brand now, it used to be, you're going to create a 30-second TV commercial and a 15-second TV commercial. You're going to do some digital banner advertising and you're going to call it a day because that's all that was available. Now you need customized assets based on a local level to speak to the consumer. So hopefully you can break through the clutter, their Facebook news feed. The industry is using the phrase, thumb stoppers, just so people actually stop scrolling through their phone and watch your ad. And now the ad that everyone is going after is they're calling it 6-second ads, where it's very quick little bits of content and little bursts to hopefully get them across. And even Fox Sports tested it during the World Series on actual television. So it's even crossing over from digital to TV. So from where we were 5 years ago, I can't even imagine how much more it's going to accelerate in the next 5, given how quickly everyone is aggregating data on consumer behavior. Because it's going to become so customized within what they're calling programmatic advertising, where, if you are interested in XYZ, you're going to get served this ad. And I'm sure everyone's experiencing, they looked at these pair of boots on Amazon when they go to CNN.com. And there's like 18 of those pairs of boots there waiting just to get you to buy it. So understanding the digital space is just going to transform the way we do marketing, and the decrease of brick and mortar sales and the increase of e-commerce is just changing the scope of everything.
Yeah, it sounds so like technology and analytics, kind of 2 areas that are going to really emerge in this space.
Yes, definitely. It already has.
It already has, right?
You're already so far behind if you're not keeping up with it, and that's a large challenge with some industries that are a little more old school as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm sure, whether it was your part-time classmates or even your full-time classmates at Stern are asking you, Michael, like, what do I need to do to get these types of jobs, right? Like, what advice do you have to applicants for what they should be prepared to do to break into a place like Unilever or Heineken?
Yeah, my advice would be, I'm sure every person on this podcast has said, is network. network with people in the industry and try to understand the scope of their roles, but not really just to network and understand the scope of their roles, but to understand how you would be able to add value in that sense. When I was at Stern, I was, part of the the Graduate Marketing Association there.
Yep.
And I would be meeting with people who had that exact same question, or like, how do I get into the Heineken world? And I would sit down with them and look at their resume, and they're like, oh, I have no experience in marketing. And it comes down to people don't understand what marketing is and how it's, truly defined at these corporate levels. I specifically remember meeting with a girl who had started her own toy company in China, and then also came to the US, did an internship, and developed Google AdWords and the search strategy for an online bookstore. And she's like, I have no online experience. And she also created content and videos. And I was like, what do you think marketing is? So it's just a matter of catering experience to show the organization that you're applying to that you can add value. And a lot of those things, whether it be, learning the mediums of the Facebook and the basic technologies behind it, you just have to understand how to market yourself to them in a good way. And that's where the networking, I think, really comes in, not only from just an introduction standpoint, but figuring out how to make your brand speak for itself.
Right. Well, that's really interesting. So when you say let your brand speak for itself, like you mentioned, adding value, like could you give an example, for example? How would you do that? Just to make it a little clearer for our listeners.
Yeah, sure. So I'll use an example of someone maybe was an ex-consultant or who worked in finance before their MBA and they're trying to break into brand management. I think the finance or consulting way of breaking down a problem or analyzing data or balancing a budget and then applying that to a marketing role is relatively easy. So within consulting, if you're trying to solve a business challenge, it's the same thing from a marketing perspective when you have to look at Nielsen or IRI data to understand, if my product is not doing well in this region, why is it? And then you try to break down and just analyze data and come up with a recommendation on how to fix that. So there are definitely skills across the different mediums. It's just a way of how you, I think, market them on your resume.
Got it.
So if you're saying, okay, hey, I'm going to go solve this problem and do a whole matrix thing, some marketing recruiters might be like, all right, that's too complicated, that's too finance focused. But if you say, I analyzed a business problem and aligned with 5 different stakeholders, put together a business case and got it approved and impacted the overall business by XYZ, then it's just a matter of speaking the same language.
Yes. No, that's such great advice. And did you notice in this space that it's tougher for international MBAs to kind of get in here? I mean, that's kind of what we've heard, but I'd love to hear your perspective on it. Like international MBAs trying to break into brand management in the US.
I didn't notice that at Unilever specifically, just because they're such an international company. Yes. And I obviously don't know the feedback on the podcast, but I do know there is sometimes some hesitation just based on visa status and the ability to sponsor someone if they're not able to work in the US.
Right.
Or they go to school. So I think that sometimes is unfortunately a hiccup, but I don't think it's as relevant. The only other thing I could think of is just the understanding of the US retail market is very different than any other market on earth. So I think that just could be a potential challenge, but it's not something you can't learn because, like I said, people come in not understanding anything about brand management or how Walmart works or how Target works, and they easily pick that up. So unfortunately, I don't have much insight into that.
Yeah, no. Well, we'll appreciate your insights there. And I mean, do you think that what misconceptions do you think MBAs have about what you do as a brand manager? And I would love for you to clarify any of those misconceptions that you hear.
Yeah. One of my best friends went to Johnson & Cornell. And before that, he was in finance at Goldman Sachs. And I always tried to explain to him what I did in brand marketing. And he always thought that I just sat in the room with other people all day and brainstormed ideas and then went out and created them. And then until he got his MBA, he's like, okay, wow, you actually do a lot more than that in terms of managing the business and the P&L and the forecast and making sure product arrives and all the things I mentioned before.
Yeah.
So I think the misconception about brand management specifically is that it's all about creativity and creating TV or digital assets. And that's not the case. I think that's definitely the Mad Men effect, as I call it, where everyone thinks you work in marketing, you work at an agency, and you're on the creative side, but that's a completely different skill set.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you, I mean, it just sounds like there's a million and one things to do based on, what you've described a brand manager does. Like, how does one stay on top of all those upstream and downstream activities, all the various relationships? I mean, are you literally like on your phone 12 hours a day?
It really depends on the stage of the business and also the time of year, but how you set up your team to function as well.
Yeah.
Like I said, at Unilever, the upstream and the downstream, between product innovation and product execution, were completely separate. You guys might not even talk to each other until it was time for, an innovation handoff to come to you, and then you start planning with launch. So, because there's so many different iterations of products or packaging that could happen, but it's definitely a very responsive role at times when there could be a lot of firefighting if things go wrong. But ultimately, it's a lot about prioritization, figuring out what you have to get done versus what's nice to get done. Because there's always things you can do. There's always work that can be done in the business. But you just have to be clear in setting expectations for your manager, the people that work for you, and understanding what the key goals are to make the business move.
Yeah. I mean, could you share with us maybe one of your proudest, this sounds very much like an MBA question, by the way. I'm sorry. You have to do this again. But would you mind sharing with us like one of your proudest achievements in this space, like some project or some partnership or something you're just really, really excited about having done?
Yeah, sure. I'll actually go back to my Unilever days because one of the greatest things I think I worked on there was I was rounding down my time on Axon of Men Plus Care, the face launch, and there was an opportunity to lead a project which was across 3 different entities, one being Unilever, but within Unilever was all of the men's brands, so Degree, Dove Men Plus Care, Axe, Suave Men, and then also Clear, which was a men's shampoo brand that was launching. And then we would work with Target, the retailer, and then GQ, the obviously media mogul for men's fashion. And it was the first time that all 3 companies wanted to work together, where Target would dress celebrities in the Massimo or Merino Target apparel, which is Target's private label lines. And we would photo shoot them to go in an advertorial for GQ, but also use Unilever men's products during the shoot and have it laid out there so it would be part of the actual photo shoot. So we were working on this partnership for a few months, and then it was passed off to me in the beginning of January, and we had to get everything done in time for a March in-book launch. So basically, our 6-page print ad had to be done within 6 weeks. We had to align on 2 different celebrities to work with. And by align, I mean align with 5 or 6 different brands internally at Unilever with Target leadership, as well as with the GQ folks who were going to go out and source the talent. We had to figure out which products we were going to highlight. We had to do the shoot. We had to get approval from Target to actually go out and do the first ever display in the men's apparel section with personal care products.
Oh.
So what I'm saying is we were able to get a display with Axe deodorant, Dove Men deodorant, and so on in the men's apparel section. And that's the first time they ever did cross-merchandising. And it's also the first time that GQ ever let their logo be used in store.
Huh.
So this was all done in 5 weeks.
Oh my gosh. So, I mean, taking from that experience, using that as an anecdote, what would you say are like the best and worst parts of being a brand manager?
I think the best part is you're able to try a bunch of different things. You're always able to be creative, not necessarily in the sense of, okay, I've got to come up with a funny ad, but a creative problem solver as well. Get people on the same page and they'll sell what your ideas are, because since you're going to drive the business, you're the one who has to come up with the ideas to do that. No one in, the research department or the operations department is really going to come forward and try to find ways to come up with an idea and execute it. So that's very exciting because there's ownership there. I think sometimes the toughest part about bringing a brand manager is that it's almost positive as well. Everyone cares so much about the business, which I think is just part of people's nature, where whether right, wrong, or indifferent, everyone has a point of view. And there has to be a time where, you just have to stop and move forward and hit a deadline, where if you're working on packaging or an ad and it's never going to come out the right way because everyone always wants it some way different. Mm. So at times there's a lack of empowerment and trust because everyone, as a consumer, whether you're an employee doing brand management or if you're someone walking around the street, you always have a comment you want to make. And that's sort of part of the everyday subjectivity of the role.
Yeah, no, that's so interesting. And isn't there, would you say that there's more of a lack of control with the brand these days, with how much input brands are getting from consumers? And yeah, I just feel like the brand brands tend to be, or seem to me to be more open these days, but I don't know, maybe I'm just, that's just me.
No, I definitely think you're right. Because it's no longer, when Facebook launched and Facebook advertising was, hey, do a post and, it's still push, or push advertising where you just, throw some content up there and then that's it. Now it's all about starting a conversation. We want consumers to react. We have social media monitoring agencies and approved response lists that they can talk to consumers, whether it's positive sentiment, negative sentiment, or driving them to find something. So if brands aren't reactive and having a conversation with consumers, it's just, in my opinion, it's going to backfire. Mm. And consumers also aren't scared to call brands out for certain things. If you're late on a flight, they're going to tweet at Delta and they're going to expect, 3 miles or something. There's so much more activity that has to go on, which, is great for jobs and stuff like that. But in terms of the amount of control, it can be a positive, but it can also be a curse, because if something bad happens and it just, continues to snowball where your reputation goes down, it's hard to come back from that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you were to model and assemble the ultimate Voltron toy of brand managers, the ultimate brand manager, the LeBron James of brand management, what would you say, what would that person look like to you? Because I just want our listeners to, have an idea of what it takes to succeed in this space.
Yeah. I could give a very MBA answer where it's, it's got to be a great combination of IQ and EQ. But it's definitely true because you have to have an analytical side. But I think the one thing that I found in, managers that I've truly respected and have truly enjoyed working for, or able to influence people and, have people want to, follow them to the end of the earth, whether at work or at not, is definitely a sense of empathy. Mm. Not only for your employees that work for you and your teams, but an empathy because it goes down to the consumer insight, where if you don't understand the consumer, you're not going to understand how to speak to them. And then also realizing and having the self-awareness that you yourself are a consumer, and it's not just about, getting something out the door is important. Because I can't tell you how many times we'd be looking at something ready to launch, and I'm like, do we even like this anymore? Mm. And then we just have to reassess and be like, are we too close? Let's show it to some different people and things like that. But for me, I definitely think empathy and just emotional intelligence overall, it's something that really can't be taught. Mm. And it's something that's more innate, where IQ, you can study, you can pick it up, you can learn the financials, you can learn how to break down problem processes, but the whole idea of understanding who you are, who your people are, and who your people are, I think is better.
And did you have any sort of brand management Bibles, so to speak, or, websites that you would regularly refer to or look at for ideas or inspiration that you could share with our listeners?
I don't know if this is me being old school, but I very much enjoy Adweek. They're relatively easy reads. They give you a lot of insight into what's going on in the industry. They share some best practices, and they also, talk about different conferences and things like that. But there's so many different resources out there now, and it's just, I would say my guidance would be, don't try to keep up with everything. Don't try to learn everything. you'll just drown in the amount of information that you can find online.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because you say don't learn everything when I think a lot of MBAs are told to learn everything.
Yeah, and I think that's an unrealistic expectation.
Yeah.
Like, who knows everything? It's just not possible. I'd rather have someone who knows a few things and are confident in it versus trying to fake knowing everything.
Yeah.
And it's just have a point of view, whether right, wrong, or indifferent. Just have a point of view and stick by it.
So, I mean, it kind of sounds like maybe in this space, there can often be a lot of like paralysis or analysis paralysis in that sense, right? So much information, so many things to kind of put together. So having that point of view could really help as someone working on your team. Yeah. Yeah,
definitely. It's a point of view to help steer the ship, but there's so many, you all learn from everyone else's point of view. The fact that, if you have a boss that you disagree with, it's great because you guys can learn from each other. And I think that's also a negative perception from potentially other industries where, if you or your boss disagree or something's right or wrong, then, the wrong way is not going to happen. But within business and with brand management specifically, you can try a million things and none of them are going to be right. Because there's so much luck at the draw until someone actually buys your product, you have no idea. So I've met a lot of people who don't like those who disagree with them, which I just think is fundamentally wrong. If you have a point of view, no one should ever get upset with you about that, because as long as you have rationale and reason why you're going to back it up and why you believe that, that's how you add value to the team.
That's awesome. And where do you see kind of your future, in a company? Do you want to become, say, like a CEO of a company, or like, what's the next step? Because, is the ultimate place, I guess this is different for everyone, but is the ultimate place for you where you are now? Like, where do you want to be, in other words, in like, say, 10 years?
Yeah, I think from like short and midterm for me is definitely to move into the space, like I said before, where I think is the biggest opportunity, whether that be digital or e-commerce. Because I really don't think the type of role I'm doing now will be around in the next 10 years. That's very, very drastic to say, but it'll be fundamentally different. And also, brand management at times can get a little cyclical. I definitely want to scope out and change the skill set within digital and e-commerce. And I think the brand strategy, like I said, jack of all trades, master of none. I really want to become, more focused on the white spaces of what's growing right now. So PMO, I don't think is the right track because it's too specific. PO, definitely, I would need to get more of an analytical finance background as well. But I think in 5 to 10 years, I definitely want to focus on digital, and then who knows where the world will be then.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Who knows? No, it's awesome. So, Michael, your insights into brand management space have been amazing. But I'd also like to talk to you about being a part-time MBA. In fact, this is the first time on the show we've actually spoken to a part-time MBA about their experience. First of all, how was your experience at Stern? Were you just was it very overwhelming to have to take, 2.5 years to complete your MBA while working on these big brands?
I think the experience overall is what you make of it. When everyone in the program would always joke about how it's on a curve. Like when you start, you're just so hyped up that you're starting. You're going back to school for the first time, and it could range from 3 to 15 years depending on the classmate. And you're like, I have to do every piece of homework. I have to do every piece of reading. I have to go to every single club meeting. I have to go to every single, and then, by the second semester, you're like, this is just not sustainable. So then you start tailing off and realize, which classes you have to go to, which ones will interest you, which club meetings you really want to focus on. And I think that's where the difference, or the key difference between part-time and full-time is, just because full-time, like, you're in it. Like, you're going to every beer blast on Thursday. You're going to every happy hour. You're networking. You're going to every presentation. But part-timers don't have that luxury. Part-timers, you're either going to class all day Saturday, or when you're doing it, during the week, you're getting home at 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, and then waking up the next morning to go to work. So I don't think I was overwhelmed. It didn't seem like anyone in the program was, and which is great because I think the professors were very understanding if you were a part-time student, if you had to travel for business or, go off for a presentation. They were flexible in moving exam dates or things like that, but you were expected to do all the work. You were in classes with full-time students, you still had to get everything done. The grades were still the exact same. But overall, my experience was phenomenal. I thought they had a great program, great application process, the great, aspect of going through similar classes as your core group. And I think the main downside is you're just not able to take advantage of everything the full-time students. That also included recruiting.
Right. Well, yeah, we hear so much about the MBA being about like networking. So much of the value of it is about networking. And did you feel like you were able to, not only build a great network during your part-time MBA, but also benefit from the wider Stern MBA, alumni community as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think the best part was sort of the cohorts that you had, as well as the alumni network. Because since everything was combined, all the events you went to had all the students there, full and part-time. And everyone, as you know, in that type of environment wants to learn, wants to help each other, wants to connect you with other people or have conversations or share experiences. So it was all very positive. And then Stern, for me at least, has had at least one of the best alumni networks where, if you reach out or people reach out to me, you're just going to get a response because you went to Stern.
Yeah.
So the networking aspect, I think, was great, but it's still obviously what you made of it. And sometimes the inability to go to happy hours or events because you were working could impact that. But then you just turn into the quality over quantity conversation. You need to go to 15 happy hours a semester. Some people do. People enjoy it. Other people are like, hey, I'm going to go to one or two, really make my mark and make friends, and then set up like a coffee chat with other people when I can. There's just different ways that people like to form connections.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you graduated from that part-time MBA program in 2016, right?
Yes.
So have you seen many of your classmates from that part-time program switch into, say, different functions or industries, after like a year or two out from their MBA?
I've seen a few people switch and a few people remain the same, but definitely their career accelerated within that. I don't know if it was just a matter of timing on where they were or if the MBA could help. But I also know there were a few success stories, at least from friends that I had, that, really worked hard to network during part-time and then completely careers. And I was not only like just proud of them, it was just like, great to see that companies were willing to take that leap of faith. But it primarily was because they were a finance background. They were focusing on brand management in the part-time program. And, the company was viewing the MBA as almost like an internship and then taking them on as, a brand marketer after.
So yeah,
there's definitely the people who wanted to switch and put in the effort. And then there were those who were a little more casual about it.
Yeah. So yeah, to sum up, who do you think, who would you advise to get the full-time MBA, and who would you advise to do what you did and get that part-time MBA?
I think my advice for the full-time MBA is if you really want to break into the different fields, whether it be brand management or a leg of brand management, it could be research or it could be media, when you have, I would say, not that much experience or think that you cannot apply specifically to brand, but more importantly, you're not willing to take a pay cut and start from the bottom. Because sometimes that will happen when a company will take a chance on you. They'll want you to learn it from the ground up. And if you are working in finance or an iBanking or consulting, that's going to be a huge step down for you. And you're going to have to be willing to do, all the grunt work. So I think that's where the MBA almost counts as, like the undergraduate internships or the way of paying your way through. And then I think for the part-time people, it's also a lot of it for some people is financial. You can't take off 2 years to go to school and support that level of debt. Some people were working parents. They wanted to go to school at night. But definitely just the idea of continuing your education and then continuing within the field that you're attempting to be in right now, you can only accelerate it that way, or potentially leverage it to a very adjacent field. But trying to break into a new industry like brand at a similar level to where you were before, I think will be very hard unless you're very young. I would say if you're between like undergrad, like 21 to 27 years old, and you're only a few years out of school. I mean, I had a friend who was like chemical engineer or went to the part-time program at Unilever and then ended up switching into marketing a year after she graduated from the part-time MBA. So that worked out. But I think it will probably be a lot more challenging for someone who's been out of school for 10 to 15 years and then transition into an entry-level marketing role after that, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. No, this makes total sense. And, if you were to do it all over again, like, what would you change about your part-time experience? Would you have focused on something different? I always love to get people's, insights after they go through something like that.
Yeah. And I just gave this advice to someone on Saturday who's going through the program now. I was like, try classes that you never thought you would take, that you somewhat find interesting, that you don't ever think that you would apply to your real job right now. Because in the future, you don't know what it could be. Like, I look back and I wish sometimes I didn't focus so much on marketing. And I think I said before, like, I would have loved to take a real estate finance class just to learn, more how to deal with mortgages when I buy a house or something like that. But definitely try something that piqued your interest and go, at least at Stern, you had the ability to have concentrations where you have to take a limited number of courses similar to like majors in undergrad. But also you had the option to take whatever you wanted and just get a general management MBA, which is the exact same thing. Like, I can't think of people within the part-time program that, 10 years from now, they're going to be like, oh, what did you concentrate on? Like, it doesn't matter 10 years from now. Like, as long as you have the checkbox of an MBA, I think some of the value you'll get from different experiences will help you out in the longer term.
It's really great. Let's end it there. Thank you so much, Michael, for spending your night talking to us. Really appreciate it. And thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Thanks for listening to the Touch MBA podcast. Don't be shy. We have a mailing list. Go to touchmba.com and get yourself signed up. And we'll keep you posted with the best tips and insider interviews on how to get into your number one school. You can also find us on Twitter and Facebook at Touch MBA. See you soon.